Hello. I never thought I'd have to hire private security for my grandmother's funeral, but after my sister tried to steal her body from the morgue, I wasn't taking any chances. Looking back, I should have seen the signs of Rachel's desperation much earlier, but nobody expects their own sister to forge a will and try to have them declared mentally unstable, all over an inheritance that didn't even exist. The whole nightmare started 3 weeks ago when Grandma Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 92, sharp as a tack until the end, and the only person in our family who ever stood up to Rachel's manipulative behavior. I was there when she died, holding her hand in the hospital room while Rachel was supposedly stuck in traffic, actually at her lawyer's office trying to contest Grandma's power of attorney. "Promise me you'll stand your ground, Marcus," were Grandma's last coherent words to me. "Rachel will try to take everything, just like she always has. Don't let her win this time." I had no idea then just how prophetic those words would be. Within hours of Grandma's death, Rachel launched an all-out war. She showed up at the hospital with her lawyer in tow, waving a document she claimed was Grandma's real will, one that conveniently left everything to her and painted me as an unfit heir due to alleged mental health issues. The will was obviously fake. For one thing, it was dated last month when Grandma was already in the hospital and barely able to hold a pen. For another, it referred to property Grandma had sold years ago. But Rachel had always been convincing when she wanted to be, and she'd spent years cultivating relationships with every distant relative and family friend. Marcus has been unstable for years. I overheard her telling our cousin Amy in the hospital hallway. "Remember that time he disappeared for 6 months? He was in a mental hospital. Mom and Dad covered it up, but I have the records. I had actually been doing volunteer work in Guatemala, something Rachel knew perfectly well since she tried to sabotage my visa application. But she'd always been skilled at twisting the truth, making her lies just plausible enough that people who didn't know better might believe them. The real shock came 2 days later when I arrived at the morgue to make funeral arrangements. The attendant looked confused when I showed my ID. "But we just released your grandmother's body an hour ago," he said. "Your sister had all the paperwork." My blood ran cold. "What?" "Yes, she had a court order and everything. Said there was a dispute about the burial arrangements and she had temporary custody of the deceased." I immediately called my lawyer, Thomas, who'd also been Grandma's lawyer for the past 20 years. He was as shocked as I was. "That's impossible," he said. "I have Eleanor's detailed funeral arrangements right here, and there's no way a judge issued that order without notifying me." We spent the next 4 hours in a panic, calling hospitals and crematoriums, trying to figure out where Rachel had taken Grandma's body. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Rachel's ex-husband, Jack, who'd remained close to the family even after their divorce. "She's lost her mind, Marcus," he told me over the phone. "She called me ranting about how Eleanor had millions hidden away and how you were trying to steal her inheritance. Said something about needing to do a private autopsy to prove Eleanor wasn't of sound mind when she changed her will last year. We found Grandma's body at a private medical facility in the next county. Rachel had forged my signature on multiple documents and convinced a sketchy pathologist to perform an unauthorized autopsy. When the police arrived, she was in the facility's office, screaming at the doctor who had refused to proceed without proper authorization. "You don't understand," she shrieked as they led her away in handcuffs. "Marcus has been poisoning her for months. Check her tissue samples. He wanted her to change the will." I felt physically ill watching her meltdown. This wasn't just Rachel's usual manipulation. This was full-blown delusional behavior. The Rachel I grew up with was calculating, always careful to maintain plausible deniability. This woman raving about poison and hidden millions was a stranger wearing my sister's face. Back at my apartment that night, I started going through Grandma's papers, trying to understand what had triggered Rachel's breakdown. That's when I found the letter, dated 6 months ago, hidden in an old photo album. "My dearest Marcus," it began in Grandma's elegant handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and Rachel has likely already begun her campaign to destroy you. You need to understand why. The truth about your parents' death wasn't what we told you." My hands started shaking. Our parents had died in a car accident when I was 12 and Rachel was 16. At least, that's what everyone had said. But according to Grandma's letter, That was a lie crafted to protect both me and the family's reputation. The truth was much darker. Mom had discovered that Dad was planning to leave her for another woman, Rachel's guidance counselor from school. As it turned out, she'd confronted him during a drive up to our lake house. The police report, which Grandma had gotten access to years later, suggested that Mom had grabbed the steering wheel during an argument, sending their car off a bridge. But here's the twist that made my blood run cold. Rachel had known about Dad's affair. Not only known about it, but had been actively helping him hide it, delivering messages between him and her counselor, helping him set up secret email accounts. She'd been only 16, manipulated by both her father and a trusted adult into betraying her own mother. Rachel has never forgiven herself, Grandma wrote. But more than that, she's never forgiven me for knowing the truth and still choosing you as my heir. She sees in you all the goodness that was in your mother, and it drives her mad with guilt. The money isn't the real issue, Marcus. It never was. The letter went on to explain that most of Grandma's wealth was tied up in a charitable foundation. The only real inheritance was the lake house, the same one our parents had been driving to when they died. Grandma had left it to me because she knew I was the only one who might be able to break the cycle of pain that place represented. I was still processing this revelation when my phone rang. It was the police. Rachel had made bail, and she was headed to the lake house with a can of gasoline. I broke every speed limit getting to the lake house, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. The last time I'd been on this road was 15 years ago, the day after the funeral, when Grandma had taken me to collect some of Mom's things. Rachel had refused to come, claiming she was too grief-stricken. Now I understood the real reason. As I rounded the final bend in the road, I saw Rachel's car parked haphazardly in the driveway. She was already on the porch, fumbling with the lock, the red gas can at her feet. In the dim twilight, she looked so much like Mom it made my chest hurt. "Rachel," I called out, keeping my distance. "I know about Dad and Ms. Carter." She froze, her whole body going rigid. When she turned to face me, her eyes were wild. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. "You don't know anything," she spat. "You were just a stupid kid. You got to stay innocent while I had to carry this poison inside me for 20 years. I know you were just a kid too," I said softly, taking a careful step forward. "Dad and Ms. Carter manipulated you. It wasn't your fault." Rachel let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Not my fault? I helped him plan their meetings. I lied to Mom's face over and over. I knew they were meeting here that weekend. If I had just told her sooner, if I hadn't been such a stupid, selfish little girl trying to be Daddy's favorite." She picked up the gas can, her hands shaking. "This place should have burned years ago. Everything that happened here, all the lies, it needs to end." "And then what?" I asked, moving closer. "You think burning down the house will burn away the guilt? Rachel, Mom's death wasn't your fault. You were a victim too." "Shut up," she screamed, unscrewing the cap of the gas can. "You don't get to forgive me. You don't get to understand. You're supposed to hate me like I hate myself." That's when I noticed something that made my blood freeze. The smell coming from the gas can wasn't gasoline. It was much sweeter, more chemical. "Rachel," I said carefully, "what's really in that can?" Her smile was terrible to see. "Something that will make sure we both go up with the house. It's fitting, don't you think? This is where our parents' story ended. Why not ours too?" I had seconds to make a decision. Rachel was already splashing the liquid on the porch on herself. The fumes were making my eyes water. One spark and everything would go up in flames. But as I looked at my sister, really looked at her, I didn't see the manipulative woman who'd tried to steal Grandma's body. I saw a broken 16-year-old girl who'd been carrying an unbearable burden for 20 years. And I knew what Mom would want me to do. I stepped onto the porch, my shoes squelching in the chemical liquid. Rachel's eyes widened in panic. "Stay back," she warned, pulling a lighter from her pocket. "I'll do it. I swear I'll do it." "Then we both go," I said calmly, moving closer. "But first, you need to hear something. I found Mom's old diary in the house last time I was here. Did you know she wrote about you every single day?" Rachel's hand trembled, the lighter wavering. "You're lying. She wrote about how proud she was of you, How worried she was that you were growing up too fast, taking on too much responsibility. She knew something was wrong that last year, Rachel. She could feel you pulling away. But her last entry, the day before she died, she wrote that no matter what was happening, her love for you was unconditional. Stop it, Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face. Please stop. Mom loved you, Rachel, and she wouldn't want this for you. Neither would Grandma. That's why she left me the house, not to punish you, but because she knew you needed to be free of this place. The lighter slipped from Rachel's fingers, clattering onto the porch. I kicked it away just as she crumpled to her knees, 20 years of pent-up grief finally breaking through her carefully constructed walls. I held her while she sobbed, ignoring the caustic chemicals soaking through both our clothes. We stayed like that until the police arrived, having been called by Jack, who'd followed Rachel to the lake house, worried about what she might do. The EMTs wanted to take her to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation, but I insisted on riding with her. As they loaded her into the ambulance, she grabbed my hand. Why? She asked hoarsely. After everything I've done, why would you risk your life to save me? I thought about Grandma's letter, about Mom's diary, about all the broken pieces of our family history that had led us to this moment. Because you're my sister, I said simply. And it's time someone broke this cycle of pain. But that night in the hospital, as Rachel slept under mild sedation, I discovered something that changed everything. While the doctors were examining her, they found evidence of a serious underlying condition, one that explained her recent erratic behavior far better than simple grief or guilt. Rachel had a brain tumor, a large one, pressing against her frontal lobe, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and emotional regulation. The doctors estimated it had been growing for months, possibly even a year, gradually affecting her personality and behavior. Suddenly, so many things made sense. The escalating paranoia, the uncharacteristic public outbursts, the reckless schemes that seemed unlike her usual calculated manipulation. The Rachel I knew would never have attempted something as blatant as stealing Grandma's body or trying to burn down the lake house. She'd always been manipulative, yes, but never desperate or sloppy. The surgery was scheduled immediately. During the weeks of Rachel's recovery, I had time to process everything that had happened. I spent days at the lake house, reading Mom's old diaries, finding photographs I'd never seen before. There was one of Rachel at 16, standing between Dad and Ms. Carter at a school function. Looking at it now, I could see the discomfort in her posture, the forced smile. She'd been a child caught in an impossible situation, forced to carry adult secrets that no teenager should have to bear. 3 months after the surgery, Rachel was like a different person. The doctors said removing the tumor had helped, but the real change came from finally confronting the past. We spent long hours talking, really talking, for the first time in our adult lives. She told me about the guilt she'd carried, how she'd spent years trying to prove she was worthy of love by controlling everything and everyone around her. I thought if I could just be perfect enough, successful enough, maybe I could make up for what I did, she confessed one evening as we sat on the lake house porch. But all I did was hurt more people. The legal consequences of her actions couldn't be entirely erased. She had to pay fines and do community service for the Morgue incident. But her medical condition and genuine remorse worked in her favor. The judge was surprisingly understanding. Grandma, it turned out, had been right about everything. The lake house wasn't really about property or inheritance. It was about healing. Rachel and I decided to turn it into a retreat center for families dealing with trauma and loss. We named it Eleanor's Place, in honor of the grandmother who tried to help us face our demons even after she was gone. Last week, we held our first family grief counseling session in the same living room where Rachel had once planned to end everything. As I watched her share her story with a group of teenagers struggling with their own family secrets, I saw something I hadn't seen in my sister's eyes since we were children. Peace. The millions Rachel had been so desperate to find, they never existed. But in the end, we both found something more valuable, the truth about our past, and a way to turn our family's darkest chapter into something that could help others heal. Mom's diary sits on my desk now, open to her last entry. Love, she wrote, is not about keeping secrets to protect people. Real love is about being brave enough to face the truth together. It took us 20 years and nearly losing everything, But Rachel and I finally understood what she meant. Yesterday, I found Rachel sitting by the lake, holding Mom's old locket. The one she'd been wearing the day of the accident. "Do you think she'd be proud of us now?" she asked quietly. I thought about how far we'd come, from fake wills and stolen bodies to building something meaningful from our pain. "Yeah," I said. "I think she would be." And for the first time since that terrible day 20 years ago, I truly believed it. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or property or even memories. Sometimes it's the chance to finally break free from the past and build something new from the ashes of what was lost. Thank you for listening the story to the end. Write your thoughts about it in the comments and do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next videos. Bye.